everyone. Welcome to Speaking of. And for our discussion this week, we will talk about situating organizations in the new normal and seeing the importance of organizational communication in these challenging times. And we're very lucky to have with us an agile people leader, a human capital champion, and a strategic business partner with demonstrated experience in leading human resources functions such as organizational development, talent acquisition, talent management and development, leadership development, employee engagement and experience, labor relations, and total rewards in education, automotive, customer service, quick service restaurant, entertainment, and technology industry. So please welcome to Speaking of Mark Cancino. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Charles, and hi, everyone.
Thank you, Mark, for being with us here in Speaking of. So, si Mark ay human resource development expert siya. So, may experience din siya sa academe, may experience din siya sa practice ng human resource management. So, let's start with the first question. Because most of our listeners right now are students. So, what makes the workplace similar or different from the university?
I think what sets them apart would be the education sector or the academe shall serve as the foundation for the industry, because sometimes we usually think na sobrang magkaiba sila when dapat talagang they complement each other. So it's in the academe that you learn the basics, the foundations, ethical considerations, parang how to, for example, how to lead an organization with the values, for example, in UP, honor and excellence. And the application of that will be in the industry. Like how well can you apply your knowledge from the academe to the industry. And
Right.
aside from that, kasi what is being taught or you're being trained in the academe, the discipline in terms of doing the work. So not only the values, but the discipline. So you can apply that when you go to the industry.
So yung organizational culture, hindi rin pala siya masyadong malayo from the university when you compare it to organizations. Kasi si Mark, you've been a part of a lot of organizations already, right? And being a UP graduate, paano mo kaya masisituate yung similarities and differences from the university transitioning to the organizations that you were a part of?
Each organization has different cultures. For example, the government might be different from private companies. But when you look at it, merong mga similarities in terms of, for example, nandun yung mga roles, nandun yung how you organize workload depending on the position, nandun yung you have to deal with a lot of people, with your stakeholders, nandun yung targets, nandun yung roles and responsibilities. So common yon among different types of organization. But I think if you're from the academe transitioning from the industry, what you need to do to have is that agility to be able to adapt well and to be able to parang apply your learnings from the previous to your new organization.
Right. So let's focus on the idea of agility. So ito ba itong Mark sa isa sa mga life skills that you would recommend university students to instill in them while they are in college? Paano nga ba yung agility in an organization?
Okay. Siguro before that, parang I have like 5 essential skills that you need to learn from or you need to practice as early as when you're in the academe so that you can be successful in the industry. So para madaling matandaan na lang siguro, I would have the acronym C.A.R.G.O. So parang yun yung what you need to have to be successful. First is communication. Second is agility. Third, relationship, stakeholder management. G is for grit, and then O for organizational acumen. So I'll start with communication. So not being biased that we are both communication majors, but communication is really integral wherever you go, not only in the academe or in the corporate setting, but in any type of organization. So because communication skills is like, it's a skill set. So you need to be good at both written and oral, especially now, not only face-to-face, but also digital communication. You also have to have presentation skills because you have to deal with a lot of stakeholders, presenting your projects, etc.
Mamaya magbibigay tayo ng tips sa kanila on presenting yourself, lalo na sa work from home or sa online interviews as well. So now let's go to agility, letter A.
Okay, for agility, like you really have to adapt really well to the environment because again, like what I said, culture is different. So you have to be flexible. You'll also be able to deal with a lot of personalities So kailangan alam mo yan. And agility in a sense that whatever situation you have, you can still thrive. So for
Yes.
example, different businesses transition to work from home arrangement. So if you don't have that agility, you won't be able to really be successful in navigating through the changes.
True. Letter R.
R would be talaga hindi sa isa natin, no? Relationship or stakeholder management. So in your organizations in UP, you have to deal with, for example, different committees when you're part of student organizations, when you're part, for example, of the student council that's dealing with different colleges, college representatives. So you can have that skill and then practice that as well in the industry because you have to build rapport, build relationships because they will be your, may tinatawag tayong coaches, mentors, and also sponsors. So for you to be successful, kailangan you don't only have that boss. So expand your network. So for example, taga HR ako, but I have mentors and coaches from finance, for example. And aside from that, if I perform well, I know that people from other functions will be there to support me. So that's my sponsor naman.
So may connection pa rin siya with communication that you talked about earlier. And then letter G. Ito very interesting because I think some of our listeners are familiar with grit.
Yep.
Right? And it's a good indicator and predictor of success in our generation now. So what is grit in organizational communication?
Like, I'll relate it to agility. So because there are a lot of changes in organizations, hindi lang siya internal but also external. So like what you said, Charles, grit is very important for you to be successful in the industry. I'll relate it to agility because there are a lot of changes that you have to undergo and you have to be successful in managing those changes internally and externally. So while it's good that you're flexible or agile, kailangan masustain mo rin siya and that's where grit comes in. So as long as you have that perseverance and dedication to still, for example, achieve your goals, grow in the organization despite the challenges, then for sure you'll be successful.
Letter O.
Lastly would be the organizational acumen. So similar in your organizations, yung alam mo sa field mo, for example, if you're from psych, the theories that you know there will be applied in the industry in such sense that you have that acumen to apply to turn those theoretical foundations or underpinnings into
Right.
applied or to apply it. And
Right.
then more specifically, you have to have business acumen. So dapat alam mo paano siya tumatakbo para hindi ka lang focus sa role mo. For example, HR, your role is not only to take care of people, but also to take care of people for the business, something like that. You should also know the basics of financial acumen. And lastly, part of acumen would be data and analytics. So marami nang nagsasabi and studies would also suggest that you need to be able to use data to drive your decisions.
Right. So itong cargo na ito, it's very important lalo na sa ating mga student listeners right now who actually plan, kasi most of them first year pa lang, second year pa lang. So meron pa silang time to engage themselves in different community or even organizational work in the university as well. Or even yung mga graduating na, at least they know that these life skills are very important in the future as well. In the recent months, in the past year, sobrang nag-iba ang organizations sa Philippines and worldwide as well because of the pandemic. So what are the changes that happened to organizations because of the COVID-19?
Yep. Since I just mentioned being data driven, so I'll just cite the study of ADB, which was conducted last for the period of 28 April to 15 May. So according to that, in terms of business, di ba lagi natin naisip, what are the negative implications or impacts? So we have the following statistics, like 75% of the enterprises surveyed temporarily closed. Tapos 29.1% naman had limited operations. And then 76.8% had sharp decline in sales. And then 39.1 had challenges in production capacity. So meaning talagang nag-down yung mga businesses kasama ng economy because of the limited movements.
And even big companies, right? Big corporations. Tapos syempre marami ring na-impact sa mga small and medium enterprises natin. So talagang walang prepared dito sa pandemic na nangyari.
Talagang disruptor siya. But
Yes.
aside from the negative, meron pa rin naman mga positive na nangyari. Like there have been new businesses that were established.
Yes.
For example, the tech companies, mas nagkaroon sila ng mas tumaas yung ano nila, parang value nila because of Zoom and other platforms.
Yes.
And then suddenly, di ba yung mga Filipinos nagkaroon na ng entrepreneurial mindset?
Yes. Kung ano-ano na yung na-develop or ginawa nila to respond to the pandemic, di ba? In terms of the face shield, nagkaroon ng face shield, nagkaroon ng iba't ibang kahit food businesses, ang
I
daming
agree.
nagkaroon ng food businesses, nagkaroon ng mga face mask businesses. So talagang may challenges and opportunities nga itong sa pandemic na ito. But I want to talk about organizational leadership, Mark, at balikan natin yung C.A.R.G.O na sinasabi mo kanina, because for you to be able to adapt in a very challenging situation like a pandemic, iba yung organizational leadership na hinihingi sa'yo ng situation na ito. So what do you think makes a good leader in this pandemic?
So a good leader is able to manage himself or herself well first. Kasi yung importante parang you also have to manage yourself despite all the changes because only then can you manage other people.
Yes.
So dugtong ako ng sinabi mo, Charles, sabi nga ni Abadir 2020, diba may pa-citation tayo
May
nito.
citation.
Parang yung talagang yung coronavirus pandemic, naging litmus test siya to all organizational leaders because you have to do leadership outside the normal environment Parang ang dami talagang changes. So for me,
Parang wala siya sa textbook, no? Hindi ka hinanda
True.
ng textbook to become a leader in a pandemic.
Yeah, wala siyang policies talaga Talaga wala siyang nakaset guidelines. So you have to be good at self-leadership at the same time team leadership as well. And key in team leadership and organizational leadership would be communication. So dapat talaga you have that vision to be able to navigate through those complexities and involve your people in decision making. So parang be transparent, ano na ba yung nangyayari, saan tayo papunta, so that's how you can guide them.
Yung involving the people in your leadership, that's very important, lalo na siguro sa organizational communication, right?
Yeah.
So organizational communication is your communication as leaders, as employees, the communication in even the formal and informal networks inside a company as well. Tapos, let's talk about involving the people because when we talk about organizational leadership, di ba, ito yung mga medyo nasa higher ups na. But then, most of the time, when we talk about organizational communication, kasama din dito yung mga employees natin na talagang nanibago din sila in terms of the pandemic. May mga nawalan ng trabaho. Ang daming mga survey na nagsasabi they feel that they're financially insecure because of the pandemic as well. But then, ano nga ba yung challenges ng isang employee? Kasi how do you now reach out to these employees who are experiencing such challenges? Lalo na work from home sila. Diba? Ibang-iba na yung setup ng most of the employees in the Philippines and around the world. So, in terms of communication, what do you think are the challenges and opportunities that working from home bring to an organization or to an employee?
Yep. So, in terms of platforms, so syempre nagbago talaga siya from face-to-face. We're now transitioning to digital communication platforms such as Zoom, Microsoft Teams, etc.
Biglang kailangan mong matuto ng mag-Zoom, di ba? Mag-Microsoft Teams. Before, hindi naman siya skill na kailangan.
Yep. So dapat the organization should provide enough support for the employees. That means not only in terms of providing them the tools, but providing them enough support like training, paano ba to gamitin itong mga tools na to. So, from there, parang nag-take over na talaga yung digital communication. Naging ano na siya, parang core na siya ng isang organization. And then, from there then, kailangan hindi lang tayo nagre-rely sa face-to-face. So, mas na-challenge tayo when it comes to writing. Kasi 'di ba hindi na mabilis makausap yung mga tao, so we need to rely on Slack channels. Minsan nga nagagamit pa yung Facebook, so I think that's also one challenge. How to switch up kasi parang nag-merge na yung personal mo and professional, which we don't advise as organizational practitioners na parang you shouldn't use Facebook as the parang tool to communicate kasi nawawala yung balance.
Is that a decision na talagang very conscious ng organizations? Which channels do you think is the best for your employees?
Yep. So because we also have Workplace by Facebook. So para rin siyang Facebook Messenger pero for companies. So pwede mo gawin 'yan. Pero yung iba kasi with the pandemic, ang nagiging challenge should be kailangan 24/7 ka na online. So in that sense, yung ibang organizations resort to using Facebook because people are usually online on Facebook.
Yes.
But we should avoid that because like again, hindi mo na separate yung personal from professional. So ginagawa ng ibang companies, they partner with different organizations such as Microsoft, Slack, or iba't iba pang startups para hiwalay yung workplace communication.
Right. At hindi lang siya sa communication, even the spaces inside the home, 'di ba? That's also a big
Yes, yes.
aspect sa ating employees' mental health and even their physical well-being as well. Kasi ang hirap nang i-divide, not just online, kasi sa Facebook, 'di ba? Minsan yung boss mo tatawag or magte-text,
Mm.
or sometimes, 'di ba, it blurs the line kasi nga sometimes friend mo na yung boss mo or friend mo na yung office mate mo. So,
Yep.
wala na sa kanila yung idea na, ay, may message ko siya sa Facebook at ng 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. In terms of organizational leadership or organizational communication, how do you reach out to those employees na medyo challenge sila in terms of these technologies and digital communication? Because I'm sure there's a good number of employees na medyo hirap sila to adapt and to be more digital, lalo na sa mga situations natin ngayon.
Yeah. So we can do a self-paced training. So for example, before launching a work suite or before launching this platform, meron ka dapat na tools explaining how to use it. Second one can be coaching. So you may be partner with a person in the organization who knows how to do it, who will guide you step by step. And then lastly would be parang meron kang buddy. So aside from the coach, meron kang buddy that you can talk to so that if you have a lot of questions, siya yung sasagot.
Talagang good flow of communication pa rin from the mentor to the mentee,
Yep.
from body to employee. So I think really communication has a big part as well in adapting to all the challenges that this pandemic has been giving us as well. Tapos Mark, in the last few months, ang daming trainings na binibigay, hindi pati Coursera man yan or online trainings man yan, 'di ba? How open are employees to learning online as well?
Parang what's good is that we're able to, parang most employees would tell us that it's a positive experience having a lot of resources, but sometimes the danger for HR departments is to provide a lot of trainings. So dapat may pacing din yan. And that's why we advocate now micro-learning. Yung mabilisang learning lang siya. You don't have to sit on your chair and then open your laptop for 1 hour. So for example, meron ka lang hindi alam na gawin, may mabilisan kang material to look into, just read 3 minutes. So that's micro-learning. And then what we can also do is to have self-paced learning. Na for example, merong 5 modules under this topic. So just study it when you're free or when you're comfortable studying or learning.
Talaga may idea rin ng timing pala kahit sa online learning.
Yes.
Siguro lalo na sa online learning kasi parang mas information overload sila sa online nila. So Mark, what are your tips? Kasi nga all of these challenges that the employees are facing right now, what are your tips in managing work from home as effective and as efficient as possible? Kasi marami pa rin ng population natin are still doing work from home. Kasi, pero medyo ngayon nagta-transition na ngayon yung iba physical offices na sila. So, how do we manage as effective and as efficient as possible working from home?
Yeah. Super, parang nagiging privilege pala yung pag-work from home ngayon, no? Hindi siya kasi available to a lot of roles.
Yes.
But in case you're parang blessed to have that work from home arrangement, my tips would be, para rin mabilis, acronym P.O.D.S. So meron ka para magpapahinga ka sa pod mo. P for prioritization. So meron tayong tinatawag na 80-20 technique. Parang from all your tasks, choose the 20% that will lead to the 80% impact. Parang ganun siya. Ano yung high impacting tasks mo? Para yung the rest na mga minimal yung impact, it wouldn't consume much of your time. So for example, in terms of calendar, kasi usong-uso yun, maraming meetings.
Yes.
What I would do is to have time blocks. I'm fortunate that I'm in an organization that, for example, prioritizes work-life balance. So meron kaming sacred lunch. So bawal ka mag-set ng meeting doon. Meron din kaming meat-free Wednesdays. So yung Wednesday ko, binablock ko talaga siya. Sometimes, if I know I have to do a lot of individual contributor work, nagbablock din ako ng schedule ko ng ibang araw. For example, 1 hour, 2 hours. And then, second would be over-communication. So parang bago yung concept na yun, di ba? Parang bakit yung over-communication? But in the industry, we have this notion that you can never over-communicate. So that just means maximizing all the channels where you can communicate to ensure na walang miscommunication, wala kang hindi nabanggit.
Right.
Then,
lalo pa ngayon, Mark, no, yung sinasabi mo na miscommunication, parang weird na sa sobrang daming communication outlets and modes that we can communicate, mas parang dumadami rin ng miscommunication, lalo na in the workplace. Right? So, very important itong idea na sinasabi mo na there's no such thing as over-communication. Let's exhaust all means to communicate with one another.
And part of that exhausting all channels would be to also improve quality and
Yes.
integration. Dapat kung ano yung sinabi mo sa one channel, integrated siya sa other channels.
By integrated, you mean dapat parallel siya, pareho siya?
Yes. Or kung hindi man pareho, parang may, for example, in terms of general announcement, pwedeng email. Tapos for specific ones, pwedeng other platforms.
Yes. Ngayon, may nabasa akong meme na parang when we do work from home, parang nare-realize natin na some meetings can actually become just emails.
Yes.
Diba?
Agreed.
Very important yung mga ganong idea din kasi minsan nakaka-exhaust din ang mga meetings natin lalo na online, diba?
Yep.
The letter
really,
D.
Yep.
Ay, sige, go Mark.
Yeah, we really have to redefine meetings. So, before kasi pag meetings, information dissemination siya, di ba?
Yes.
But now, if that's an info that can be sent through email, like what you said, email na lang yan, so that meetings are focused on decision-making and problem solving.
Yes.
And then letter D would be disconnection for connection. So, we always feel like we have to be connected, but sometimes you have to disconnect, not only from your workplace, but from the world, parang ganon.
Yes.
So, for example, like maximize your breaks. So, at that 1 hour or 30 minutes, talagang wag ka muna mag-work. And then, that's also means setting boundaries. Kailan ka lang pwede mag-contact, kailan ka dapat hindi mag-contact, ano yung mga sacred hours mo. And then, identify your triggers as well. So, parang disconnect ka doon sa mga triggers na meron ka.
And letter S?
Letter else will be sounding board. So look for your sounding board. So there should always be that one person you can really talk to. So for example, kapag sobrang stressed ka na, kasi even if you do prioritization well, nag-over-communicate ka, nag-disconnect ka, minsan di pa rin maiwasan yung stress. So in that sense, there has to be someone you can easily talk to.
Right. So P.O.D.S, prioritization, over communication, disconnection for connection, and sounding board.
Yes.
At kita-kita naman natin, I think, two things. The first one is boundaries. Sobrang importante ng boundaries, lalo na sa work from home, diba? Boundaries man yan sa space, boundaries man yan sa time. Ang gandang realization at ang gandang reminder din na may mga time ka dapat to disconnect from your triggers, and even time for yourself not to be in front of the computer screen or any screen at all. Kasi nga nakaka-stress din siya talaga sa ating mental and emotional being as well. And sounding board, diba, very important yun kahit inside your own family or even a friend or even your special someone. It's very important that you have a sounding board. And all of these are parts of communication as well. So, P.O.D.S.
Yes.
Ikaw ba gumawa ng lahat ng acronym na ito, Mark?
Yes. Sabi ko kasi paano mabilis maiintindihan ng audience. So parang ganun din sa training, di ba? Or kahit anong announcement ngayong pandemic, kailangan merong mabilis maintindihan ng audience mo.
Yes. Clarity and simplicity, very important. So last question, most of the time, lalo na ngayon, sobrang daming pinapagdaanan ng mga employees, di ba? Marami nawalan ng trabaho, marami nga sa kanila work from home, tapos hindi ko ngayon maisip kung paano ka ngayon nag-juggle ng maraming work kasi iba may mga sidelines pa sila.
Yes.
So, since most of the job interviews right now, they happen online, right? Siguro bigyan natin ng mga tips and tricks yung ating mga listeners on how to ace your job interviews or even your presentations online. Kasi baka hindi sila sanay na humarap sa camera, hindi mo nakikita yung audience mo, sa screen ka lang nakikita. So, what are your tips and tricks? Kasi you're also an expert in talent acquisition. So, ano ba yung mga hinahanap ng isang talent, ng isang expert sa talent acquisition?
Before I answer that, I just want to emphasize that interviews are supposed to be two-way communication. So meaning it's not only the employer assessing your skills, but it's also your avenue to also assess if that organization is the one fit for you. And that's the organization where you want to go. So for the tips, first is meron dito tips even when you're not doing it online, kahit face-to-face. So first would be, meron po ulit tayong pa-acronym na PERFECT. So we can't be perfect, pero ito yung mga tips to help you become that. So first would be professional branding. So meaning, kailangan marunong kang mag-market ng sarili mo. Very corporate yung term, but you know how to expose yourself out there. So meaning, you have to have your own brand when it comes to your LinkedIn accounts, Facebook,
Yes.
if you have websites, blogs, etc. And that should also translate to your visual, verbal, and vocal. So for example, visual, paano ka ba manamit? Parang if kailangan tailor fit siya dun sa culture ng company. So kung very traditional or very corporate, so dapat na corporate attire ka pa rin kapag may interviews. If you think that it's a lean, parang millennial type of organization, baka hindi na kailangan na sobrang formal yung damit mo. In terms of verbal then, parang how you talk. Like, because as much as possible, it should still be formal, but it doesn't have to be boring. So
Yes.
dapat conversational pa rin siya. And then, in terms of vocal, how you talk, kasi iba pa rin. So minsan dapat pakinggan mo yung boses mo kung maganda ba yung register. So that's P. Next is engagement and conversation. Again, it's a two-way conversation. So dapat ini-engage mo rin yung kausap mo. Ask questions, parang ask for advice.
Mark, yun yung question ko kasi most of the time, students will ask me, for example,
Yes.
kasi di ba interviewers would often ask you, do you have any question for us?
Yes.
Diba? Eh medyo nakakatakot siya to ask these questions, lalo na kapag newly grad ka or bago ka lang dun sa workplace. So
Yep.
what do you think are your recommendations when they ask you to ask for questions? Anong mga questions ang pwedeng i-ask sa mga interviewers?
Definitely, that's also your chance. If you get asked that questions, grab that opportunity to ask questions. So safe questions would be like, how do you describe the culture of your company? So how is growth and development in this company? So how do you describe your leaders? Parang what are the opportunities for me to explore other departments? So pwede mga ganun yung questions natin.
So learning more about the culture of the organizations, which sabi mo nga kanina, it is a conversation. So it's very important that you're doing research as well. Okay.
Yes.
Noted.
So that's E, engagement and conversation. Next would be results orientation. So you should be able to show in your interviews that you care for impact. So because you wouldn't care anymore ano yung ginawa mo, but what's the impact of what you did? That's why in your CV pa lang kahit hindi yan interview, you should make sure that you have metrics. For example, if you don't just tell the interviewer that I organized an event, what happened in that event? Paano siya naka-impact sa organization mo?
Take note nyo yan sa among student listeners natin who want to revise their CVs, di ba? Hindi lang general yung nakalagay sa CV nyo, kundi results-oriented siya as what Mark said. Kaya pala uso na ngayon, Mark, yung mga numbers, right? For example, you are doing an event, ilan yung umattend, what is the evaluation of that event based on numbers. So very important pala siya sa mga interviews na ito. Letter F?
And letter F is follow-up. So for example, if you feel like there's a hanging question na feeling mo hindi masyadong nasagot, go follow up. And then follow up then when it comes to minsan kasi ang tagal magbigay ng feedback. So wag naman tayo mag-follow up immediately after.
Mga
Siguro,
ilan, Mark? Kasi di ba nagsasabi yung iba, ang pinaka nakakatawa and pinaka nakakatakot kapag sinabi sa'yo ng interviewer na we will message you or we will send you an email. Tapos syempre ikaw as an interviewee or as an applicant, isipin mo, is it too soon? Is it too late? Kailan ko ba dapat ipa-follow up yung results ng interview ko? Meron bang rule na ganon?
I wouldn't say there's one number na pwede ka after 2 days, 3 days. I think the safest way is for you to ask. For example, sinabihan ka na just wait for our communications. Pwede mo sabihin na when can I expect that? Or parang when I can do follow-up if ever. So para sa kanila mismo na galing.
Okay, that's a really intelligent idea para sa ating mga listeners. And letter E?
E would be elimination of distraction. So alam naman nating online, di ba? So dapat you're in a room where you're comfortable, tapos medyo tahimik siya, so that you can really focus on the conversation. Right. So for example, in my case, so sorry sa mga nakikinig, medyo maingay kasi nasa probinsya nga, may mga naririnig kayong noise. But there, so just eliminate not only a physical noise, but also emotional noise, psychological noise. So dapat well-prepared ka talaga for your interviews.
Right. Letter C?
C would be emphasize your contribution or value add. Because one of the questions would be, sometimes interviewers ask the question, what makes you different from the other applicants? So that's where you'll answer your contribution or value add. Saan ka nga ba papasok in the general scheme of things? For example, you can say that I think we all have the same parang qualifications, we can do the same things, but what sets me apart would be my values, maybe that, or my leadership experience. So yun lang, just emphasize your contribution or value add.
Okay. And letter D.
Lastly, pinaka-basic but we forget this would be technology check. So check natin kung strong ba yung internet connection natin, if our microphone is working, kung kita ba tayo sa video. So those are the basics that will be part of the assessment because interviewers will think na, oh, prepared siya for this interview.
Yes, I think that also speaks a lot about your preparation, diba? Ako, I always tell people, do research on the company, right? Very important yung sinabi mo, Mark, na professional branding. I think as early as now, for our listeners who are students or those who are trying to get out there and apply, diba? Importante na alam mo yung sarili mo and how do you brand yourself in terms of your, sabi nga ni Mark kanina, verbal, physical, and even your attire. That really is a very important, lalo na in making an impression, right? So, how do you make an impression in an online interview? How do you make them? Kasi, Mark, paano mo ba malalaman, for example, ikaw, how do you know that an employee or an applicant will get the position?
So, aside from making sure that the employee has the following competencies, it's really how you interact or deal with people. Because like what I said earlier, in all companies, in all types of organizations, stakeholder management is there. So if you're able to sustain the conversation well, na nandun yung impact and substance, I think that also helps. Because employers now don't only look at the technical skills, but also the core skills or essential skills. I don't want to call them soft skills, but essential skills like communication.
Sabi nga nila yung communication, it's not a soft skill anymore, right? It's a necessary skill in professional and personal life as well. So, last question natin for our podcast this afternoon is, if there is one characteristic of an employee na sa tingin mo ito talaga you cannot let go of, na as early as now people should develop, what would that one characteristic be?
I think it's the attitude of the person. Parang sabi nga nila, don't hire for the skill, hire for attitude. I'm a believer of that because you can learn skills eh. Right. Parang you can also do self-study for the skills. But if you don't have the right attitude, like being game to accept tasks, being game to lead teams, if you don't have the positive mindset that whatever happens, I'll be here dedicated to work. So I think that attitude is really the key.
Right. So attitude is the key. At hindi pa sinasabi ni Mark yun dun sa mga acronyms na binigyan natin. So that's very important as well. Thank you, Mark, for our session this afternoon. Ang dami kong natutunan, lalo na yung ideas ng how communication is very important, lalo na in an organization. Before the pandemic pa, and even more so during this pandemic, on how organizational communication is a very important aspect of any organization, be it public, be it private. Si Mark, marami na siyang experiences, right? May international, may local, academe, different organizations. Siguro, our takeaway point for today, Mark, in your experiences as a coach, as a mentor as well, what is one tip that you would like to give a new employee or someone who is just new in terms of job application? If there's one tip that you could give them.
Yeah, first is to really learn the ropes first. So have a good understanding of the context, because if you just go or act or behave in such a way that wouldn't match the context, then that wouldn't help your career at all. So it's really more of the sensitivity to the context and then culture.
So learning your ropes and of course your attitudes, these are very important aspects according to Mark as well. So thank you so much for listening to our podcast episode for this week. I do hope you learned something new. I learned a lot of things in terms of organizational communication that I will think about and also apply in my own organizations as well. Thank you, and we'll see you in our next episode.